Hi, Kathy.
Hello, Dinara. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Fantastic. She is going to be talking about 3 things all web professionals need to know about privacy. Take it away, Dinara.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And let's see. All right. Kathy, do you mind confirming that you can see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Awesome. All right, great. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the 3 things all web professionals need to know about privacy. Before we get started, I would really like to thank the organizers of all the talks for having me on here. I was supposed to speak at a bunch of events this year and unfortunately had to miss all of them. But it's really great to be able to come together and especially do this as a fundraising event. So this is really no small feat on behalf of the organizers and figuring out the technology and all the speakers and stuff. So I'd first like to thank them for having me on here. And I'd also like to thank everybody who is listening. I can bet you anything that 5 years ago, you would not have said that you're going to be watching a privacy talk in the middle of a pandemic. So I really appreciate you joining me here, as I know that I'm competing with Netflix and Amazon Prime. So thank you so much. So before we get started, I would like to say that privacy is becoming more and more important in the eyes of consumers, which is pushing privacy laws forward. And these laws will affect you and your clients no matter where you're located. So privacy is something that is not going away. So my goal today is to talk to you about that. And hopefully by the end of today, you'll feel more comfortable knowing stuff about privacy and even having this conversation with your clients. So let's get started. So my goal today is to talk to you about 3 things: which websites need a privacy policy, why privacy policies are important, and why you should be the ones to talk to your clients about privacy. Before we get started on all of this, let me first tell you why I think that I am qualified to talk to you about privacy. So I'm a data privacy and technology attorney. I'm a certified information privacy professional, and I'm the president of Termageddon, which is a generator of privacy policies, terms of service, and more. I'm the engineer behind all of the policy questions and the text, and I also keep track of changes to privacy laws and update our clients' privacy policies whenever those laws change. I'm also the chair of the Chicago chapter of the International Association of Privacy Professionals, which is the largest privacy organization in the world. I'm also the newsletter editor for the American Bar Association's e-privacy committee, and I've taught GDPR to other attorneys at the Illinois State Bar. And I'm also a beekeeper. I know that's really not relevant here, but I thought that it would be fun to share. Here's me and my bees. And at the end, if you have any questions about that, let me know. And also questions about privacy, of course. So let's start with part 1. What websites need to have a privacy policy? Now, there are a lot of misconceptions with this one. A lot of people think that only e-commerce websites need one, or that only websites that sell or share personal information need one. And that's really just not the case. So let's start with the one and only definition that I'll have in here, because I'm going to try to keep this the least amount of dry possible. But personally identifiable information, or PII, is any data that could identify somebody. So for example, a name, an email, a phone number, or a physical address. And any website that has a contact form collects personally identifiable information, or PII. The same holds true for websites that have newsletter sign-up forms, billing portals, contact forms, anything like that. All of those are collecting PII. Now, any website that collects PII needs to have a privacy policy. And if really you don't remember anything else from this talk today, it's that any website that collects PII needs to have a privacy policy. So when you're building a website that has a contact form or an email newsletter sign-up form or a billing portal or anything like that, that's really when the light bulb should go off in your head saying, okay, I'm building this website that has a contact form. It's collecting PII. That means that this website needs to have a privacy policy. And it's really just that simple. Now, why does PII collection and privacy matter? Why do websites that collect PII need to have a privacy policy? That's going to be our part 2 here. So at least for me, I'm one of those people that I'm much more likely to do something if I know why. If you explain to me, if you tell me to do something and you don't tell me why, chances are I won't do it. So I think that this is going to be a very important point to consider is why? Why does it matter? So privacy laws regulate the collection and use of personally identifiable information. So privacy laws require websites to disclose what PII is collected, what is done with that PII, and who that PII is shared with. And those required disclosures are made in the privacy policy. So that's what a privacy policy is. It's a document that lets users or visitors of a particular website know what is happening with their personal information once they submit it to you. Now, just to be clear, there are a lot more disclosures that these laws require. These are just the main ones. They're kind of the meat and potatoes of what a privacy policy is. And depending on what privacy laws apply to you, you could have a privacy policy that's very long that makes 10, 20 different disclosures, or you could have a privacy policy that's relatively short that has 3 or 5 disclosures. So as of right now, there are 4 main privacy laws in the United States and the European Union that govern the use, collection, and disclosure of PII by websites. So the first one is the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, which is a privacy law that protects the privacy rights of European Union residents. I'm sure that a lot of you have heard of this one. A lot of people were freaking out about this in 2018, and that freaking out, unfortunately, hasn't stopped. But GDPR applies to businesses that are located in the European Union, businesses that offer goods or services to European Union residents, regardless of that business's location, or businesses that monitor the behavior of European Union residents, regardless of that business's location. So you can see how GDPR can apply to businesses outside of the European Union. If you're located in Chicago, which is where I am, and you're selling things to European Union residents, you need to make sure that you're complying with GDPR. The next one that we have is the California Online Privacy Protection Act of 2003, or CalOPA, which applies to any website that collects the personal information of California residents, which really could be pretty much any website with a contact form located anywhere, because all you need to do is collect the personal information of California residents. So if you have a contact form where California residents could submit their information, that's when you need to make sure that you're CalOPA compliant. The California Consumer Privacy Act, which is a relatively new law, it went into effect January 1st, and it's going to start becoming enforced July 1st. Now, what's really interesting is that a lot of groups have asked the California Attorney General whether this law is still going to be enforced on time because of COVID-19. And he essentially responded that yes, July 1st is the enforcement date. And then he also added potentially even earlier. So even though the enforcement date is July 1st, the Attorney General can prosecute violations going back to January 1st. So a privacy policy that's compliant with the CCPA and the law applies to you, you need to make sure to do that now. But the CCPA applies to any for-profit business that does business in California and that meets one of the following: has annual revenues of 25 million or more, annually buys, receives, sells, or shares the PII of 50,000 or more California residents, households, or devices, or derives 50% or more of its annual revenue from selling the PII of California residents. Now, what's important to note here as well is that if you don't meet these thresholds, but you do work with businesses that do meet those thresholds, they might require you to be CCPA compliant via contract, because a big portion of compliance is vendor management. So you need to make sure and check your contracts to see whether or not that law would apply to you through contract, even if it doesn't apply to you through the statute itself. And then lastly, we have Nevada Revised Statutes Chapter 603A and SB 220, which was amended late last year. And that basically applies to any commercial website that collects the PII of Nevada residents and enters into a transaction with a Nevada consumer, has nexus with Nevada, or purposefully directs its activities towards Nevada. What that means is that even if you're not located in Nevada, but you have customers out there, you're entering into transactions with Nevada customers, you need to make sure that you have a privacy policy that's compliant with that law. Now, the most important thing to remember with privacy laws is that they are created to protect the consumers of a particular state, country, or region, not the businesses. So these privacy laws are actually very broad and can apply to businesses outside of that state or country, as I just explained. So even if you're not located in California, Nevada, or the European Union, that doesn't mean that these privacy laws won't apply to you. It does mean that you need to pay attention to what's going on and potentially have a privacy policy if the laws do apply. And if you or your clients get inquiries across state lines, you need to seriously consider getting a privacy policy. Now, other states are proposing privacy bills. The European Union had GDPR, which is one set of rules that applies to the entire country, to the entire conglomeration of countries that is the European Union. Unfortunately, in the United States, we have not seen a federal privacy law that applies to just regular websites. So we see a lot of states proposing and passing their own privacy laws, all of which have their own specific requirements and penalties and, privacy policy disclosures and things like that. I won't go through all of these just because I don't want to bore you to death, but you can find this tracker on the Termageddon blog. It's termageddon.com/blog, and it's the state privacy bill tracker. And this gets updated pretty frequently because things change very quickly here. But, these laws have very different requirements, but they also have some similarities. So for example, each privacy law would require websites to have a privacy policy and have that privacy policy make specific disclosures. Some of these bills would apply to large businesses only, whereas others would apply to businesses of any size. And then some of these would allow consumers to sue businesses directly. So for example, we have New York, which is proposing a privacy bill which would allow New York residents to sue businesses anywhere in the world just for having a contact form without a compliant privacy policy. Now, I'm sure a lot of us here are keeping a close eye on the Americans with Disabilities Act lawsuits. And since consumers have been able to sue businesses directly for ADA violations, we have seen a very large explosion of these lawsuits, with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them being filed every year. And that's kind of what we are expecting to see here as well if consumers can sue for privacy violations. But right now, we have the state's attorneys general and the Federal Trade Commission enforcing these laws, but things could change. Another thing that's very important to note is that all of these bills are so broad that they could apply to businesses outside of that state. So if you're located in one of these states, obviously it would apply to you. But even if you're not, that's something to consider as well, is that you need to make sure that you're keeping an eye on these to see what passes and what would apply to you and what wouldn't. Now, in terms of what happens if you don't comply with these, penalties for not complying with privacy laws can range from 2,500 per violation to 20 million euros in total. Now, per violation does not mean per website, per policy, or per day. It actually means per website visitor whose privacy rights you infringed upon. So for example, if you have, let's say you have 100 visitors to your website per month, which is really low, and 10 of those are from California, and the fine is $2,500 per person, you could really see how that could translate into an extremely large fine, even if you do only have a few dozen website visitors per month. Now, some of you may still want to roll the dice on the fines. So let me tell you about a few other reasons as to why you, your company, your clients should care about privacy. So a recent study by Cisco found that 70% of organizations say that they receive significant business benefits from privacy. In terms of significant business benefits, what does that mean? Lower costs in terms of breaches, lower likelihood of a breach, and just better efficiency, better sales. A study by Amnesty International found that privacy concerns are having a major impact on people's online behavior. That essentially means that people who are part of a platform that does not respect their privacy rights can actually end up leaving the platform. And I know that a few years ago that really wasn't the case, but after the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal, that's when really consumers started pushing for their privacy rights, started looking for privacy policies on a website, stopped using services that abuse their privacy rights. And that's essentially what we've seen since then. Privacy concerns are having a major impact on people's online behavior, and they will leave your platform if they feel like their privacy rights are not being respected. And then a different study by Cisco found that privacy concerns can slow down the sales cycle by an average of 7.8 weeks. Now, in a small business setting, that's actually a really long time. If you think about it, you don't want to delay your sales by 7 or 8 weeks. That's crazy over something as simple as not having a privacy policy. That is a simple solution to get. And all things being equal, consumers will use the services and products that do not abuse their rights. And lastly, privacy is a fundamental human right. Caring about privacy is the right thing to do. I think all of us as business owners might consider these requirements as big, as onerous, as pretty intense for a small business to have to do. But if we look at it from our perspective as consumers, we can really see how we interact with websites that don't respect our privacy. So for example, a few years ago, I put in my information to go to a conference, and I put in my phone number, and I wasn't sure about that, but they asked for it, and I was just like, okay, whatever, I'll just put it in. And then a few hours later, I was getting marketing texts from companies that I've never signed up to receive marketing texts from. So, as a consumer, I can tell right away when my personal information has been sold, when it's being used for marketing without my permission, and things like that. And it's not a pleasant experience. So I think as consumers, all of us can agree that privacy and caring about privacy is the right thing to do. And we know that other consumers feel the same way as well. All right, so time to talk about our final topic. Why, as a web professional, you should be the one to talk to your clients about privacy. So why does any of this concern you as a web professional? Maybe you build websites, you design websites, you build software, or you do marketing for your clients. Really, for your clients, you're kind of their guide to all things internet, right? So depending on the level of sophistication of your clients, they might need your help opening an email, or they might just be looking to you for a good web design service or something like that. And they might not necessarily know all of this privacy stuff. I mean, it is the business's responsibility to make sure that their website is compliant, But, if they're not that experienced with the internet, if they're not that experienced with things online and what's the cutting edge of our industry right now, they might not know these requirements, and they might be relying on you to tell you things that they don't know, especially since you're building the contact forms, building the newsletter sign-up forms. So speaking to your clients about privacy makes you look proactive and professional. Privacy is something new in our industry, and it's really the cutting edge, and there are a lot of things that are changing. And, privacy wasn't that important a few years ago to most people, but the fact that you know now that it is really makes you look proactive and professional. It helps you stand above the competition who may not be following these industry trends. Improves client retention and loyalty. Clients that see you more as a business advisor, as somebody who can talk to them about more than just their website, really helps retain those clients. It really helps get their loyalty and their thankfulness for helping them be protected from fines and lawsuits, and then can help document this and protect your agency. So the truth is that people love to blame others for their own failings. If you're designing websites that collect PII, make sure you document the fact that a privacy policy is needed, which can help you cover yourself and protect your agency in case your clients get sued or fined. You don't want them to be coming back to you and saying, oh, you never told me this, or, oh, you said that it didn't matter. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, if you do want to talk to your clients about this, and I hope that you do, the one main thing to remember is to tell them, hey, I'm building you a website with a contact form. It's collecting personally identifiable information, and there might be privacy laws that apply to you that require you to have a privacy policy. That's really all you have to say to get that conversation started for them. Just providing that insight should be immensely helpful to your clients because, again, they might just not know that. So a couple places where you could tell your clients about this when coding new projects. You can add this into your quote because you will need to be building out like privacy policy in terms of service pages before a launch of a website, because once the website launches, that's when it's collecting PII. So before a launch for sure. In maintenance plans, it can be a great value add for you. If your maintenance plans include hosting and security, and then they also include privacy. If you have not talked to your clients about this before, now is a great time to talk to them about it, because right now is the time where it's becoming more and more important. And the likelihood of fines and lawsuits is exponentially increasing for websites that collect PII. So if you haven't talked to your clients about this before, now is a great time to do so. All right. And then lastly, before we go into questions, let's talk about where to get privacy policies. So a few different places, privacy attorneys. I would not recommend using a regular attorney to get a privacy policy. Privacy law is a very specialized field that has a lot of laws, a lot of rules, and a lot of cases. And regular business attorneys just might not be aware of those. So a privacy attorney can write a privacy policy for your clients. It's not a cheap service by any means, but it can be a really good option for your big clients or clients that need special compliance. What I mean by that is anybody that needs HIPAA compliance, that's collecting healthcare information, or anybody that is collecting information from kids under the age of 13. Those are kind of onerous requirements, and they're very extensive requirements, and having a privacy attorney write a privacy policy for a website like that is a good solution. If you do end up going with an attorney, make sure that you ask them what their strategy is for keeping your policy up to date. So if they have no strategy, or if they say we're going to charge you more each time we have to update it, just know that could end up costing you tens of thousands of dollars because these laws change so frequently. Another option for getting a privacy policy is a generator. A generator is a software that will ask you questions about your business and about your website, and then we'll create a specialized custom privacy policy for you based on your answers and based on your needs. Usually generators are a faster and more cost-effective solution and can work really well for the majority of your clients. All right, so that's the end of my presentation. And would right now be a good time to go into questions?
I think so. I'm looking to see if we have some questions in the pipeline. Thank you so much, Donata, for your educational peek into privacy law. Let me see what we have so far. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in our QA yet.
So
before
we get question submissions, I actually have some common questions that I get asked a lot. Maybe I could answer those. Sure. We get those like every day. Sure. So. Okay, so the first question that I get all of the time is who's going to sue me for not having a privacy policy? So as of right now, if you are located in the European Union, that would be a data protection authority. And if you're located in the United States, it would be your state or another state's attorney general or the Federal Trade Commission. And those are actually very active with privacy law infringements. With GDPR, we have seen over 200 fines right now being issued. And I know that we hear a lot about the Googles and the Facebooks getting fined, billions and billions of dollars. But so these cases don't actually make it into the news a lot, but we have seen cases where like a single person marketing shop was fined 60,000 euros for changing the email of one customer in their CRM. So it's something that has happened quite a bit. Even one-person companies or companies that have infringed on the privacy rights of one person. If you don't believe me, Google search GDPR enforcement tracker, and I think it's like one of the first search results, and you'll see all of those, which are very, very interesting. But if we see some of these new proposed privacy bills being passed, we'll actually see consumers being able to sue businesses directly. And at least in the US, we all know what that means. That means a lot of lawsuits. So that's something to keep in mind as well, is if some of these privacy bills pass, we could see consumers suing businesses directly as well.
Great. Yeah. It looks like we have a question here, a couple questions. The first is, what are your common methods on reading privacy policies, and what jumps out as a bad policy?
That's actually a really good one. So I have read probably hundreds of these. And, a few things that I always look for is which laws apply to you. So if I see somebody that is starting off with, these are your privacy rights under the General Data Protection Regulation, and then they list like 3 of them and then miss the rest, that's always a big issue for me. A lot of privacy policies that I see that were written a longer time ago by somebody who's not necessarily as experienced as they should be writing the privacy policy is an explanation of what the law is. Like CalOPA is a law that protects the privacy rights of California residents. That's usually a very good telltale sign of somebody who's not very experienced writing these, because the consumer doesn't care what the law is. They care about what their rights are, and they care about what the disclosures are that need to be made. I also see a lot of privacy policies that will have like half of the disclosures that they need to make, or privacy policies that have conflicting statements, like we don't sell your data, and then, 10 paragraphs later, we do sell your data. One thing that I definitely would want to caution people against is copying and pasting somebody else's privacy policy. for a few reasons. So one, they might not have all of the required disclosures, or the disclosures may be completely incorrect, which I've seen a lot of. And two, those privacy policies don't update, or they don't let you know when they update. So you're kind of at their mercy to make sure that they updated their policy before the law went into effect. And then you have to check back and blah, 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 and go back and forth, which is a huge thing. And then also, if you're, for example, copying and pasting a GDPR privacy policy, but you don't need to be GDPR compliant, you're all of a sudden subjecting yourself to doing a bunch of things that you wouldn't normally have to do. So, for example, one of the GDPR rights is to delete the personal information of a consumer who asks you to delete it. If you don't have to provide that right, but you copy and paste somebody else's policy, you're going to have to do that, and you're going to have to figure out how to delete their information and figure out how to respond to them and do it in the right amount of time. So you could really be subjecting yourself to a whole lot more work than you would normally need to from what applies to your business. So definitely discourage people from copying and pasting as well.
Thank you so much for your insight. You do have some other questions regarding GDPR. We are out of time. I would encourage folks to please jump into the Slack. Donata, I assume you will be there to answer some additional questions.
I will. Yeah.
Wonderful. Fantastic. So thank you very much. And we're moving right along.
Thank you. Bye-bye.